Hello, everybody, and welcome to this one of the final sessions in the Nature Conference. And this is a wonderful side event today, sponsored by Pew and hosted by the government of Fiji. My name is Peter Davies, and I am the Coastal and Marine Ecosystems Advisor with the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environmental Program. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the 10th Pacific Nature Conference side event entitled 30 by 30 Vision, Pacific Leadership on Protected and Conserved Areas at the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. We thank the government of Fiji for hosting this event and their leadership in support of protecting and conserving at least 30% of the global ocean by 2030 via the UN Convention on Biological Diversity. We also want to acknowledge the governments of Vanuatu, Palau and Marshall Islands for their support for this target. The commitment of the Pacific region to securing healthy oceans came through loud and clear in the Vermont Declaration, adopted as part of this week's conference, as it states, "Our Pacific Ocean is the foundation of our cultures, livelihoods, and identities, our source of life." Today, we are joined by distinguished Pacific leaders from government, Indigenous communities, youth, and civil society. Unfortunately, our time together is short, so we will not have time for Q&A. Well, we'll see how we go towards the end. Now, we were today to be joined by a distinguished member of the Fijian government, Dr. Sayendra Prasad, who is the permanent mission of Fiji to the United Nations. Unfortunately, Dr. Prasad has not been able to find their way here today for us now. So what we might do is go straight to our next speaker, who is a community representative, and Sheridan Watai of New Zealand coordinates a range of relationships for Te Moana Nui a Havia, a collective of islands, nations, and scientists in the Pacific continent to create more marine reserves. Sheridan's going to share with us a community perspective on marine protected areas and the call for 30%. Thank you, Sheridan. And if you could unmute, or I will see if I can unmute.
There you go, I'm unmuted.
Thank you, marvelous.
Kia ora, and hello everybody. My name is Sheridan Waitai, and I am from the tribal area of Ngāti Kuri. So Ngāti Kuri is the northernmost tribe of Aotearoa, New Zealand. And what I've got is a slideshow just to pretty much show you what my geographical area is that I come from. So I come from an area of two oceans that join at that little blue spot that says Te Rerenga Wairua. Today I'm just going to talk a little bit about the collective that I'm part of, both locally, nationally, and internationally. So just before we start, want to point out that New Zealand does not have a large-scale marine reserve area. And it sort of makes me feel like a real imposter being here, that we have been so slack at not getting that across the line. But what I want to say about that is that we are working with our government. We have been working some time. We've had elections and there's a fantastic lineup there. So we live in hope, and we hope soon that we'll be announcing something big. In my area is a space called Rangitahua, which is the Kermit Islands. That's the area that we have designated tribally and are working with the government to create a marine sanctuary, which is around 680 square kilometres, 680,000 square kilometres. In my geographical area, we're around 1 million square kilometres that ideally we'd like to put in full management with big protection areas. So I'm part of a group of island nations, and we were supported and have been supported by Pew over the years, and we've had the opportunity to meet with each other at various events around the world to do with our oceans. And while we've been there together, we kind of felt that we needed to have more continuity and strengthen our relationships. And I'm not talking about just any islands. The grouping that I work with is like Palau and Rapa Nui and Rotima and Niue, Tahiti. They're Rapa Iti as well. They're places of pristine waters and very rare places left on our planet. So while we've been at these gatherings, we were pretty much wanting to strengthen a collaborative, because we found that our voices as people who have genealogy, which we call whakapapa, to the ocean, and have navigated this Pacific continent for thousands and thousands of years, were really absent at tables where there was leadership, and also at spaces and tables of decision making. We get invited to consult with, but consultation and being a part of leadership and engagement are kind of two different things. And we knew we needed to work with each other so that we can inspire others to commit to action and protection around the restoration of our Pacific continent, which we call Te Moana Nui a Hiva. What we've had to work with and continue to work with is a lot of Western science. The challenge for us has been that often scientists don't see or understand or recognize that traditional knowledge is science, and it's the first science, and it needs a space and it needs a place. So you'll notice that traditional people like myself will create a space for Western science, but that needs to be reciprocal so that Western science creates a space for us. That's because really, globally, and this is not disrespectful to some of the leadership, but it's being real about, if you want to heal the ocean, if you want to restore the ocean, protect the ocean, well, you can't do it without traditional knowledge. And you can't do it without the traditional leaders. So we hope that funders in that will work towards that as well, like investing in more cultural exchanges and more working with traditional knowledge keepers. So we hosted a gathering in New Zealand called Taiatea, and we brought many of those different island groupings together, what we call our siblings or our elder siblings. And we stayed together here in Aotearoa, New Zealand to form our collective. We then went on to Tahiti to consolidate that collective and did our vision statements, did our mission statements collectively. So, you know, in a post-COVID world, it's been really hard to connect with each other face to face, which is always the best. So what we've had to do is rely on technology like this, and hopefully in 2021, we'll have the opportunity to strengthen our collective together. Nationally, we have secured as a tribe around 15 million for a research project up on the Kermit Islands, Rangitahua. That's going to help us to have those cultural dialogues and exchanges across the Pacific continent. and it'll also set a framework for cultural monitoring and inform ocean policy for New Zealand. Our tribe has established what we call a taku taimwana committee, and are doing marine surveys across the summer to understand the values and behaviours on the mainland on how people engage with our spaces, because next year we'll be starting a whole marine spatial management plan, which changes the way people get to engage on the shorelines here in our region. Am I okay, or am I over time?
No, Sheridan, thank you. Please keep going.
Okay. So part of our collective is to reinstate traditional practices and strengthen those traditional practices of conservation. And across our communities, we have been gaining support from our non-Māori or non-tribal members who've been engaging and supporting us to look after special islandscapes or seascapes. Our young people have built a traditional fire pit, which is a compass as well. So it's got contemporary flavour to it. It's called a kapehu. So inside the traditional fire pit, well, it's actually surrounded by various po, like carved big poles and steel, I don't even know what to call them. But basically it's traditional storytelling and sharing mātauranga and science using firelight again and having that intergenerational change. So you can basically say it's like art, using art in a way to transfer knowledge of how to look after specific taonga and like species in the water and our relationship with those species. We've recently built a science lab, or we call it it's a collaborative laboratory for science, traditional knowledge and research. And we've built a helipad, which is we're the first tribe to do it, and biosecurity unit, so that we could fly to the corners of Aotearoa, our area, and our islands again for reconnection and restoring and reimagining. And those are pretty much our themes for protection and restoration plans. So I hope that's enough.
Thank you very much, Sheridan. I've been up and walked around that headland, and it is a absolutely stunning and amazing piece of ocean there. And it's really good to hear of the connection between traditional knowledge and bringing in science and a shared commitment there towards the conservation of the ocean. So thank you for sharing that with us.
No worries. Thank you.
I'd like now who is sorry, Your Excellency, the permanent mission of Fiji to the United Nations. And Fiji, as we know, is very committed to the 30%. It has been outspoken to that on the global stage. So thank you, Your Excellency, for helping us set the stage for today's event.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you very well. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks. Some problems in logging in and all that, but all's well that ends well. So thank you very much for inviting me to make a few remarks and comments. And I believe you have a PowerPoint from me. If somebody can manage that for me, please. It's wonderful that we are discussing this. I really wish all of you great few days, and there have been very rich conversations taking place. Some of that I've followed, Of course, human beings and the oceans, to the next slide, please, are inextricably linked and have been so, especially in the Pacific since time immemorial. Parts of these links are rooted in tradition, culture, and knowledge systems that are based on that. And the modern parts of it is dependent on commerce of the global oceans, as well as, of course, climate change. To the next slide. In Fiji's case, and which is, I hope, not a world example, but certainly the way in which Fiji is framing its protection is to take the whole of the EEZ as a managed area and then apply higher levels of management criteria to marine areas within the 100% of the EEZ. So there'll be quite a few guidelines on the whole of the EEZ area, which includes things such as not disposal of oil, etc. But within the marine protected areas and in the locally managed areas, there'll be much higher levels of protection, and consultations are underway right now. And we have made a commitment to a 30% by 30. I'm quite confident that as things begin to move, that Fiji will be logging off on the 30% marine protected area well before 2030. It is very important that all ocean actions are locked onto very good, sound legal frameworks. One, that is domestic. Two, that these legal frameworks and guidance are linked to the global frameworks that we have, including within the SDG oceans framework. But second, there's something important for Fiji, but even equally for all the Pacific Islands, that the domestic regulations are rooted as well and linked very closely to how our societies and communities understand their traditional obligations and responsibilities towards ocean and protection. And it's a complex chain that requires different levels of sophistication and understanding, as well as different ways in which we communicate the interlinkages between the global and the national and subnational, as well as the traditional. But we have to get it right if we are moving in this direction. Obviously, for the Pacific, I'm just coming out from a Pacific Forum Talanoa on Blue Pacific a couple of hours ago, and that's why I was a bit late in this. The economic potential of our oceans is significant. And I think that we are just beginning to look at the economic potential of the Blue Pacific. Our tuna industry is generally in good order. The stocks are healthy. The management frameworks can be much better and can be significantly improved. Nevertheless, within the tuna, there's lots of challenges for the Pacific to begin to rise up the value chain, Pacific branding to begin to emerge, which is very, very difficult in the current global tuna markets, and that more of the resources from tuna are coming back, a greater proportion of the tuna resources are coming back back into the region. This is a long journey, but Fiji will be is working together with the rest of the Pacific through the Pacific frameworks, FFA, etc., in moving up this. We're at an important. Your conversation is taking place at such a fundamentally important, historically important point. If COVID had not struck the Fiji and the Pacific Islands, we would have obviously already been looking at the oceans and our approach to the oceans and to the blue economy and the vast potential that it provides to the Pacific, because that's where we were coming at naturally. But in many ways, COVID has enhanced that. It's brought greater urgency to that. It has brought deeper thinking about this. And there's a lot of things that are converging then all our countries are beginning to look at the blue economy as part of the recovery, which we were not thinking about before. We are thinking about our recovery from COVID as being more blue, more sustainably blue, rather than based more on the sort of land-based industries. We are all beginning to think about what sustainable blue finance means and what that will look and feel like. And so these are exciting times. It's a difficult, very, very difficult, doggedly difficult, but these are very exciting times. And I really hope that our conversation today contributes to that thinking in the region. So I thank you again very much for inviting me to make these remarks. I wish you really well in our conversations. Vinaka Bakalebu.
And Vinaka Bakalebu to you, Your Excellency, for joining us today and making the time. And it's absolutely great to hear the recognition of the complexity from the community all the way through to the international law, and finding that balance between economic prosperity and conservation. And the approach that Fiji is taking is truly exemplary for the rest of the world. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. I will now like to pass on to our next speaker, if I may. And we have with us now Hayley Charlton Howard, an Earth Echo International Youth Leadership Council member from Australia. She is currently a student at the University of Melbourne and majoring in ecology and evolutionary biology. Hayley's going to share with us the youth perspective. Thank you, Hayley.
Thank you. I'll just see if I can share my screen. Can everyone see that okay? I'm going to take that as a yes, and I'm hoping you can't see my notes as I'm talking. But hello, everyone. My name is Hayley Charlton Howard, and I would just like to quickly extend my sincere thanks for being invited to speak today. It's a huge honour for me to be here. So throughout this conference, we've heard why meaningful conservation action needs to be taken from environmental, economic, and cultural standpoints. But today I'm going to be talking a bit about why we need to protect 30% of the oceans by 2030, but from a young person's perspective. Oops. So just a little bit about myself. I'm obviously from Melbourne, Australia. I'm currently a third-year student at the University of Melbourne, and I have always been passionate about the ocean. I consider myself really lucky to not only have grown up next to the beach, but I was in a family that is, or am in a family that was really involved in the marine biology and conservation space. So to follow this passion, I began volunteering with the Marine Mammal Foundation to help protect Victoria's amazing marine life. As a volunteer, I helped collect data about the newly described and endangered Byron dolphin, which you can see here, as well as other marine mammal species in Victoria. However, one of the best parts of my role with MMF is through my position as a Marine Champions leader, where I help connect, inspire, and provide hands-on experiences to encourage and empower other young people. I'm lucky enough to work with amazing youth across my home state of Victoria, where we learn about marine mammals, science, and conservation, and create sustainability initiatives to implement in local schools and communities. My work with Marine Champions eventually led me to become involved with Earth Echo International through being featured as a youth in action for the Plastic Seas expedition to my hometown in 2018. That's me being interviewed by Philippe Cousteau Jr., one of the founders of Earth Echo International and the grandson of the famous undersea explorer and scientist Jacques Cousteau. I'm lucky enough to be in my third term on the Earth Echo Youth Leadership Council. This council is currently made up of 27 young people from around the globe, each being incredible advocates for the environment and mobilizing change in their own communities. These people are amazing friends of mine, and they help develop and lead Earth Echo programs. And excitingly, one of the newest and most exciting programs, in fact, centers on the 30 by 30 target, which is the Ocean Echo 30 by 30 program. So why do I want 30% of the oceans protected by 2030? My home state of Victoria is part of what's known as the Great Southern Reef, a series of interconnected systems of kelp forests, sponge gardens, and rocky reefs that span most of Australia's southern coastline and partially extends into the Pacific Ocean. It's actually much bigger than the Great Barrier Reef, and while it's not as glamorous and warm, I think it's just as beautiful and important as a biodiversity hotspot. As you can see on the map in the bottom right, it's an area that's considered irreplaceable due to the high degree of endemism. Between 30 to 80% of species, depending on the group, are found here and nowhere else on Earth. However, despite being such an incredible place, if you compare it to the Great Barrier Reef, it actually has little in protections in the way of MPAs. In particular, the Great Australian Bight, which is a crucial nursery area for southern right whales, was up until recently being considered a location for offshore drilling operations. That was thankfully blocked this year, but the area is still considered for resource extraction in the future. The story of the Great Southern Reef is the reason why I believe we need 30 by 30 to protect ecologically, economically, and culturally important areas like this. We need greater protected area targets to ensure large, connected ecosystems like this are protected, not only as crucial components of the local and global marine system, but as also important cultural heritage sites for Indigenous and First Nations people, as shelter to replenish economically important fish stocks, or as crucial habitat for endangered species. I believe the goal of protecting 30% of the oceans by 2030 will allow more of these ecosystems to be protected from overly destructive resource extraction into the future, and will crucially allow a connected pathway of protected areas across the world. This
Hayley,
case study
sorry
is
to
also a
interrupt.
key example. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Hayley. Would you mind slowing down a little bit for the interpreters?
Oh, so sorry.
That's okay.
I saw a chat pop up and I couldn't read it.
That's okay. Don't worry. Thank you.
So sorry. So this case study is also a key example of how young people are involved in marine protection. Many environmentally minded young people were heavily involved in a campaign to protect the Bight, known as the Fight for the Bight campaign, either on social media or through events and paddle outs. They saw the threat to a beautiful and important marine ecosystem. They took action and they made a difference. Through my roles as a Marine Champions leader and a Youth Leadership Council member, and discussions with other young people, it has become evident to me that many young people are concerned about the fate of the ocean, either through hearing about coral bleaching, seeing the impacts of plastic pollution, or watching the unfolding climate crisis. Generally speaking, I believe that more and more young people are becoming environmentally conscious due to the pervasive nature of these environmental issues. I believe that many, if not the majority of youth that I have met, are supportive of increased environmental protection and would be supportive of 30 by 30 targets. Because we as youth know that as future custodians of the world's oceans, if change is not made now and areas of importance are not protected now, it is our future that will be impacted. I'm lucky that I'm working with organisations that seek to amplify youth voices, encourage everyone to make a difference. However, I'm aware that this is not the case for all young people. Many people I know while I was younger and in high school felt distanced from real change. They felt like without the ability to talk through voting, there was little they could do to make a difference. Instead, since many cannot vote, we share petitions, we raise awareness through social media, and we march to try and be heard. That is how we are most active in the environmental space, as many of you are probably aware. But I believe we need more opportunities for youth to have our voices heard and tell our stories when calling for the protection of the ocean. And that's why I'm so grateful to be here today. Additionally, many young people, particularly the ones that I work with on the Youth Leadership Council, are also strong advocates for inclusivity and social justice, and ensuring voices are heard that may not otherwise be. In discussing 30 by 30, many young people would thus be interested in ensuring collaboration and an open dialogue between local, Indigenous or First Nations communities as the first conservationists and scientists, as Sheridan pointed out before, and management bodies, governments, scientists and other stakeholders to blend non-Indigenous and Indigenous knowledge and experience. We believe that people should be involved in decisions that affect them, particularly in coastal communities who rely on the ocean's resources for food, livelihood and cultural uses. Additionally, people may be skeptical of the 30 by 30 targets because you could basically create a huge MPA in the middle of the ocean and say, well, we've protected 30% of the oceans, we're good to go. But what are you actually protecting? Instead, as a young person, I believe that the creation of MPAs should be governed by science, protecting areas of high endemism, biodiversity hotspots, or highly threatened ecosystems. Additionally, from conversations with young people involved in marine conservation, many youth want MPAs to be afforded strong, robust, and long-lasting protections to make sure they are protected into the future, and to have regulations within the MPA to be actually enforced. Sorry, one second. In conclusion, as a young person, I'm completely supportive of the 30 by 30 targets, as long as each MPA is well thought out, is grounded in science, adequately managed and well funded, and engages the local community. And I would say that among environmentally minded young people, like the Youth Leadership Council and the Marine Champions, there would be tremendous support for the 30 by 30 targets to ensure our beautiful oceans are meaningfully protected into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Hayley. Thank you very much. It's great to hear the young people behind this movement, and the future belongs to you. So it's good to see the engagement in the processes by young people that I've seen in this conference. I'd like to go now to Aline Schaffer of the Pew Bertarelli Ocean Legacy in New Caledonia. And Aline is going to present on efforts to safeguard the ocean through Pacific culture and art. Thank you, Aline.
Thank you so much. Hello and bonjour à tous. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today. So my name is Aline Schaffer. I'm project manager for the Pew Bertarelli Ocean Legacy project in New Caledonia, which supports the high protection of 30% of our maritime space. Since the creation of the Coral Sea Natural Park in 2014, we've been working with local communities to improve the environmental dialogue around ocean protection by setting up artistic and cultural projects. As my colleague Sheridan was saying before, our goal is to make space for traditional knowledge within the conversation we're having about ocean protection. So today I would like to present one of these projects. It's called Paroles d'Océan, Ocean Words. And I will share with you two short videos presenting the work that we've been conducting. So we can go for the first video, please.
Le projet Paroles d'Océan a pour objectif de valoriser le patrimoine culturel et linguistique kanak sur la thématique du lien traditionnel entre l'homme et l'océan. Entre octobre 2019 et février 2020, 3 ateliers environnement, culture et langue ont permis à des groupes d'artistes et artisans d'art de 3 aires coutumières du pays de partager leur savoir-faire et leur créativité. À Unia, les femmes tresseuses et chanteuses, accompagnées de plasticiennes et de jeunes danseurs contemporains, ont choisi de travailler sur la migration des espèces totémiques. L'océan, comme sanctuaire des âmes, a été le chemin pris par les sculpteurs de la région de Borendi, associés à des expressions orales traditionnelles et contemporaines. À Marée, l'atelier sur la thématique de la pollution des océans s'est développé autour de l'écriture du théâtre kanak soutenu par de la musique électronique. Protéger nos océans, c'est aussi protéger le lien symbolique et ancestral entre nature et culture. Paroles d'Océan est un projet porté par l'ONG Pew et la Fondation Bertarelli en partenariat avec l'Agence de développement de la culture kanak Centre culturel Chibaou et l'Académie des langues kanak.
Thank you for playing the video for me. I hope this went okay. So the idea of this project is to support local communities in sharing their traditional knowledge relating to the ocean and to show how Pacific culture are strongly tied to the ocean. I'm gonna play another video to let one of the artists from Marée explain his contribution to the project. The video is in native language of Marée, the Nengone, and will be subtitled in English. Thank you for playing the second video.
Melei eleni mei tepek. Musilawa tele. Una mengen si tele. Si pado kui pareto ke trabe. Ni gue watch. Ningon. Me o meno proje. Me inu tele dan sapo se ruba. Ti anetitini o na kunu ipono e jamizo teni o tele ni hao. Ka sutu tele. E tele, melei tiro inu guna meneng si tele, ka napanin to tumono tele, tele ko tiro kano ni tiro, serei, kutau. Finiko kencho no e tele melei nidi atso no milion. Bane sono e yana kulu maso ed tumono yono tele ano e libo madona tumono yono tele e oreom e basto uwe ka tele ko ti aro ini ed no ji kwasere yi ji kondrao no yana tele ya mero sono ino a je ma tumono yon jacho de ko kondrao a de ko atiro de ko mijo ko e meni ni e je ni mono.
So I will conclude in just a few words. Today, protecting 30% of our oceans is essential in preserving the totemic species, the soul of ancestors, and the traditions that make our Pacific people so unique. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Eileen. That's really so inspiring to see that. We have to hear the voice of the Indigenous traditional custodians, and the language of science is not always accessible. So art, music, song is absolutely important that we engage. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And now we're honoured to have Mr. David Ward, the High Commissioner to Samoa and former British High Commissioner to the Solomon Islands. His Excellency joins us today to talk to us about the Global Ocean Alliance and other initiatives. We know the UK is very proactive in the marine conservation space. So over to you, Your Excellency. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Excellency, fellow speakers, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I think I also have a little video that is ready to go as well to preface my words. I hope somebody is able to share that.
Without a healthy ocean, there would be no life as we know it. By creating marine protected areas, we can take care of the ocean. From mangroves to coral reefs, from the polar regions to the open ocean, these special places give us hope for the future. To give the ocean and humanity a chance, we need to reach at least 30% protection by 2030.
Well, thank you. I'm not sure if, like me, you were surprised at the end of that video to see that it was narrated by Sting. I didn't recognize his voice as I watched it, but it's, I think, an important indication of the interest around the world in marine conservation areas that someone like him should be willing to champion it. And I'm delighted this morning to be able to join you and many other champions of the 30 by 30 campaign, Fiji, my colleague from Fiji who spoke earlier, and to say a few words on behalf of my own minister, Lord Goldsmith, who is very passionate personally about this campaign, and is sorry that he could not join us personally live today, because it's where he is, it's now 2 a.m. in the morning, I think, and so he asked me instead if I would say a few words on his behalf. And I'm going to say a little bit about the importance of marine conservation, which I'm sure everyone on this in this event already is fully supportive of, a little bit about what the United Kingdom is doing, and a little bit about what we hope to see over the coming year. I think we all know already that the ocean is vital in the most literal sense of that word to life on Earth. The ocean is where life began. It is essential. It is full of wonders that we have already barely begun to understand. And we all depend on it for air to breathe, for food, resources. It permits trade, it permits livelihoods. Its benefits and its importance are incalculable to all of us. And many people, millions of people, as well as a quarter of all marine species, rely for food and shelter on the coral reefs that surround so many of the Pacific Islands that are represented here today, many of which are under threat at the moment and perhaps set to disappear as our seas become warmer and more acidic. We should remember that it is not just the marine species that depend on the welfare of the coral reefs, but also over 1 billion people who depend on fish as their main source of protein. As you will have seen from the video that we just watched, the United Kingdom is advocating the target of protecting 30% of the global ocean in marine protected areas and through other effective conservation measures by 2030. This is the 30 by 30 target, which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with. The science on this is very clear. If we do not manage the global ocean in a sustainable way and reverse the adverse impacts and preserve fish populations and increase the ocean's resilience to climate change, we will not maintain the long-term health of the ocean for either during our generation or for generations to come. We must improve the management of the ocean. And this target of 30 by 30 is not a national target. It is also a target that goes for to support the creation of marine protected areas in areas beyond national jurisdiction, which make up 60% of the global ocean. Ensuring that we can protect those areas beyond existing exclusive economic zones and territorial waters will be fundamentally important to reaching that 30 by 30 target by the year 2030. And it's for that reason that we hope to see progress in the negotiation on a new agreement under the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea on the conservation and sustainable use of marine biological diversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction conclude by next year. That's what we hope to see next year. One of the things we hope to see in the next year is the conclusion of those negotiations. We also hope that in the Conference of States Parties to the Convention on Biological Diversity, the COP15, which is due to take place next year, we will see the adoption globally of the 30 by 30 target. And it's in order to help achieve that we have formed the Global Ocean Alliance now with 32 member countries. And why we're also co-chairing the High Ambition Coalition, which supports this target, because it is by coming together that we will create the pressure and the momentum and increase the likelihood that that target will be adopted at that Conference of States Parties. I want to say a little about what the United Kingdom has done. the United Kingdom has its own Blue Belt program to create marine protected areas within its territorial waters. The United Kingdom and its overseas territories have now created marine protected areas that cover 4.3 million square kilometers of ocean. That's about 1% of the world's ocean on its own. That target was reached, or our target of protecting 4 million square kilometers in total was reached on the 13th of November, earlier this month, when the British Overseas Territory of Tristan da Cunha created a marine protected area which covered 687,000 square kilometers. That's 90% of their waters, where destructive practices such as bottom trawling, deep sea mining, extractive activities and other damaging activities will be forbidden. In that one area alone, in Tristan da Cunha, there are 25 bird species that breed on that island alone. And several breed nowhere else, including species such as the yellow-nosed albatross and rockhopper penguins. So we can see already how small steps there can be of immense benefit to maintaining biodiversity. And we want to encourage others to do that too, and to take what steps that they can. And that's why we hope to work together with the other members of the Global Ocean Alliance, not just to expand the alliance, but to encourage the adoption of the 30 by 30 target at the Biodiversity Conference of Parties next year. We've made progress so far, and we hope that by coming together in what will be the super year for nature, we can help to reverse the damage that's already been done and increase protection for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, High Commissioner to Samoa. This session's been absolutely fantastic to see all the voices which are campaigning towards the essential move of creating 30% marine protected areas across the world. And it's shown that we need the youth, the traditional custodians, and of course, countries like the UK and like Fiji, who are leading the world in the global alliance towards getting an agreement in both the CBD and in the BBNJ, which enables us to move towards this target across the entire planet. It's absolutely essential, as the Commissioner mentioned, and the science is clear. Thank you very much for joining us today. And we have some time now, if we'd like to ask a couple of questions to the panelists. The first question I'd like to pose is, how can the Pacific region best reconcile the COVID-19 economic recovery and protection and conservation of marine areas as we strive to rebuild our economies after this trying time? I might start with Dr. Prasad, if you have some comments on that.
So thank you. I think that's a great question. Our leaders are saying build back greener and build back bluer. We should begin to frame MPA establishment of MPAs as well as operating existing MPAs as in ways that are fundamentally about one, low-level investments that give you job creation through wardens, through scientists being engaged, through communities being given resources, etc. So that's one side of it, straight on small investments that give us gives income at very local community levels, number one. Number two is to begin to move some of not high-level investments, but medium-sized investments into very local levels of value addition in fisheries and marine-based products. And what I'm suggesting here is this thing. There is a trade-off. So these are no take or not no take, but managed areas. That means you can't be harvesting same levels of resources as before. You're probably harvesting 30% less. The trick of the trade is in the 30% that you are harvesting less, you are probably deriving the same level of economic gains as the 100 level from before. So therefore, you have to move into storage and preservation and processing, local level processing. So that in itself is about job creating, income creating, and creating sustainable livelihoods. And this is where I think the scientists, the economists, our communities need to get their heads together and bring all the pieces of the jigsaw and present very practical ideas about how we bring MPAs into center stage of our COVID social and economic recovery from COVID. And I very much think that we can do that. And I doubt that the restrictions are going to be limitations on access to finance and that the sort of the high-end type of problems. It is really about how we make ideas work. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Ward, perhaps you could bring some perspective from the UK, because there is pressure to open marine protected areas to fishing in various parts of the world to increase economic activity. It's a short-sighted vision, and I wonder if you have any comments on the UK's view or role in this.
Yes, sure. I have to say it's not an area of my specific expertise, but I don't think it's the position of my government that declaring a marine protected area means you have to stop all economic activity in that area. As I just mentioned in my description of the Tristan da Cunha area, it's the more destructive practices which must be stopped. The bottom trawling, these big commercial operations which basically destroy the bottom of the sea bottom and destroy whole ecosystems. That's the sort of thing which has to stop. I think where there is small scale, traditional, indigenous, sustainable economic activity going ahead that is consistent with the objectives of protecting marine life and ecosystems, then that is also permitted within the definition of a marine protected area. But you still need to create that marine protected area in order to ensure that it is just those activities which you identify and allow, and the much larger scale ones which are not sustainable do not take place. And so that way we have marine protected areas. They create a haven, a reservoir for the local ecosystem so that it can sustain and renew itself. But it will still provide for to a certain degree for livelihoods, particularly traditional livelihoods, and what the well-being of the human population in those areas as well, but without allowing these industrial scale activities which destroy ecosystems, and in the case of things like seabed mining, may have consequences that we don't actually yet really know of. So, our view is that a marine protected area is not inconsistent with continuing with some economic activity that allows people to coexist and to continue to have livelihood. The task is to stop these destructive and unsustainable industrial scale activities. That, I believe, is basically what the United Kingdom's government's view is.
Thank you indeed, and that makes a lot of sense. And I think we have time to just enter quickly into the next question, which that leads nicely to, and I'll open to our other panelists. How can we ensure that local communities truly experience the benefits of protected and conserved marine areas as well, so that it's not prohibiting access or issues of access? And I might start with Sheridan, if you have some thoughts on that, or anyone else.
So I think that for me, that goes back to communities need to be invested in and empowered. So what we tend to do is not reward them for green businesses or pay less for greener options. Like anything you want to buy that's better for the environment is a lot more expensive. So how do we support communities to have access to better choices and education? In terms of the marine area, they need to be invested in education and the ability to lead social change. That's from my perspective.
Maybe if I can add something to this.
Yes, please.
I think it's very important in the process of implementing marine protected area to involve the local communities in the decision process so that they can have a say on the areas of cultural importance for them or share the traditional knowledge linking to a certain place. And by doing that, they will be empowered and have a sense of ownership of the protected areas that are being created.
I might just quickly jump in as well. And just to add on that, from what I've heard from other presentations, something like engaging the community in the allocation of zoning. So obviously within MPAs, there may be exclusive no-take zones, there may be specific cultural zones. So allowing the communities to have some involvement and engagement in deciding where those particular no-take zones, for example, would be, to feel like they're not being locked out of the discussion and being barred from access to what has been traditionally their lands and their ocean.
Thank you, Hayley. And so I think we might wrap it up there. I'd like to thank the government of Fiji for hosting this event and all the panelists for presenting. It's really great to hear all the voices from different aspects of society campaigning towards this and the leadership of those countries that were mentioned. And I think that we're at a crossroads now with the CBD COP15 coming up next year and the legally binding instrument on BB&J. It's an opportunity to really consider how we use the ocean, how we conserve the ocean. And I have no doubt the science shows us that 30% protection is part of that holistic management of the ocean that we really need to work towards. So thank you everyone for taking the time to come today and share with us those thoughts. Thank you.